I see Dean Dare has made it in. Dean Dare, how are you doing today?
I am doing well. I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Amber.
You're
It's
welcome.
nice to see the faces. I recognize some faces of folks I haven't seen in a while, particularly with COVID. So it's nice to see some of the faces and looking forward to meeting some of the other folks.
Um, I think we're supposed to have approximately 30 to 40 people in here today. And so it seems like right now we're at 24 and we may have a little bit like some more people trickle in.
Well, if it's okay, I can go ahead and get started, and that way as folks jump on, that will allow me to kind of get through some of my opening remarks, which I'm hoping is not going to take too much time, because really this is a forum and an opportunity for you all to ask questions. I would like to begin first by appreciating you, Amber, for taking the time out of your hectic schedule to serve as moderator for this graduate student town hall. And I'd like to thank Meredith in our Office of Development, Alumni Relations, and Student Engagement for her efforts in coordinating and putting this together. These town halls are something that I started in different forms when I began as dean in June 2016. I think they started as what we call conversations with the dean, and then we, kind of shifted to a town hall format. But I always enjoy these opportunities to really connect with our students. We had our undergraduate student town hall yesterday. Wasn't as large as a group as we have today, but like I said to Meredith, if it's one person, then I'm ready to have that town hall. So I'm glad that we're anticipating about 30 folks on this town hall. I'd also like to appreciate you all, students. This has definitely been, and I'm going to say the most quoted phrase or the most common phrase of 2022. These are unprecedented times, but they really are. I mean, they really are unprecedented times. And, I know we've got some second and third year doc students on this call, but, particularly for our first semester doc students and first semester master students, like, oh my God, what a odd, strange way to begin your graduate school career with this social distancing and, most of the courses being online and advising online and, all of those things. So I just want to appreciate you all for your flexibility. I was fortunate to be appointed to some committees during the summer that focused on reopening. How are we going to reopen in the fall? And I do think some good decisions were made at the university level that really has contributed to us not having these COVID outbreaks, knock on wood, that we're seeing at other comparably sized universities, particularly with us being, an urban university where it's very hard to decipher where we end and the city begins. There are universities that are what I would call self-contained or more self-contained than we are here that are having these outbreaks. But, I think, there was some good decision making or some decisions that, at least up until right now, I feel like are some good decision making to really, do the best to try to keep us as safe as we can be in terms of, faculty being given the option to look at their class size, the format of their class and their classroom, and make decisions on whether to go fully online or hybrid or some type of remote format. The university made the decision that any class over 50 would be moved to remote format. In terms of staff, only staff who can't do their job well from home need to be on campus, and even those who are on campus are on some type of a modified or staggered schedule. And so, I think that goes a long way, along with the requirements for mask wearing and the PPE kits and I hope you all are participating or complying with the health check-ins. All of those things, I think, contribute to us having a safer community. But with all that being said, my God, it's still challenging. You all have to be in Zoom hell. I'm in Zoom hell. Like, I feel like it's zooming. So I do want to encourage you all, and this is something that I mentioned during our undergraduate town hall. We are 7 months in to this pandemic. And in all reality, spring semester is going to look like fall semester, right? And my concern for all of us, students, faculty, and staff, is similar to the way you would cook a lobster, right? You don't drop a lobster in a hot pot. You put the lobster in a cold pot and you turn the stove to, medium or medium low, and it slowly warms up till it dies. Probably should have picked a less gruesome analogy, but work with me here. My concern is that, we're doing well, and I put that in quotes from the standpoint of, we're not being overrun by major crises and issues that are happening with students in response to all of this, right? And so what that suggests to me is that folks are managing to some extent. And I hope I can articulate this clearly, but we are going through a crisis. We're going through a national crisis that impacts all of us. And so my concern is something has to give if we're 7 months into a crisis. And so what I'm concerned about is usually, and I'm a psychologist by training, so I'm kind of putting my counselor hat on. My concern is that what's giving is self-care. That's what's giving, because something has to give. That what's giving is us taking care of ourselves during this stressful time. So we sacrifice self-care in order to get our academic work done, to keep up with work, to keep up with family, to keep up with everything. And I just want to make a humble request that at some point, even today, just do it today, just stop and take about 15 minutes and just reflect on, am I taking care of myself? Right? Graduate study is hard. Make it in a perfect environment, thriving economy, no pandemic, everything is great, kumbaya. Graduate work is hard. But when you're trying to manage all of this in the middle of a national pandemic, in the middle of an economic crisis, in the middle of loved ones or friends being impacted by COVID, in the middle of fearing for your high-risk loved ones, that takes a toll. So I just want to really ask, request, encourage you all to take some time and just reflect on, am I taking care of myself? And what can I do, or what do I need to do to better take care of myself and to take some of that time? My son is a sophomore at VCU, studying biomed engineering and wants to change to computer engineering. And my daughter is a freshman chemistry major, biochemistry concentration. They're not grad students, but they're in some challenging areas. And I can tell you with my daughter, I mean, I had to sit down and have a conversation with her because of just this, with everything else going on and just the pressures of maintaining and keeping up with everything. So I just want to state that there are three, I mean, there's more than three priorities for me as dean, but there are three things that are amongst the priorities are sitting at the top for me. And one is an inclusive culture within the School of Education, particularly within our curriculum and classroom climate. I've been dean here since fall of 2016. I'm the first dean of color in the school's history. And a lot of my personal desire of even being in academia on this side, because my career started in university counseling center work, and I got my Ph.D. in counseling psychology with the full intention of going back into university counseling center work. You know, I was assistant director of counseling center at a small university that I went to, Stetson, loved it, excited about that work. But my experiences as a doc student, my experiences in watching other graduate students be afforded opportunities that I wasn't afforded. You know, being treated by certain ways, the micro and macro aggressions, and watching other doc students of color who wanted to be in academia, who decided not to be in academia because of their experiences, actually drove me to change from being in counseling center work to actually being on the academic side, because I felt like I could really make a contribution in that area while, you know, still having opportunities to do clinical work, et cetera, et cetera. So these issues of inclusive excellence and equity and culture and climate are critically important to me, and they're personal to me. Simply because, and hear me out in this phrase because it might sound weird, I almost wish there was a new type of macro aggression and racial injustice that underrepresented minority doc students were experiencing now, because it's a little bit frustrating to see folks now go through the same exact things that I did 20-something years ago, 30-something years ago as an undergraduate student, and to watch the same exact things. So I hope nobody takes offense to that statement and hears it in the way that I'm trying to share it, which things need to change in our culture. So this has been a priority for me since I began as dean. But there's also things that as dean within a university environment that I don't have control over. As a dean, I don't have control over the curriculum, and I don't have control over admissions requirements. Those are two things that are 100% in faculty control. I can make requests, I can ask, I can say, we really need to look at this, et cetera, et cetera. Now I I have a little bit more authority over administrative issues with, shared governance and input, from the faculty and staff, and have, had successes in addressing some of the institutional and implicit bias that exists in the hiring process. We have 10 underrepresented minority faculty, the most the school has ever seen in its history. And I'm not done yet. That takes work, right? But I think post George Floyd has amplified my impatience and has also amplified the impatience of many around issues of racial justice, particularly within higher education. And I'm pleased and excited about the work coming out of our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee and their whole school transformation initiative, looking at addressing curriculum, addressing climate, and addressing resources and support for these issues. And so in terms of addressing curriculum, we've got a bold initiative of a 2-year process of decolonizing our syllabi. And that takes time, but that somewhat in the space of higher education is ambitious. We've began programming around intergroup dialogue to really help and strengthen our faculty and staff in their ability to have conversations that are more equitable, inclusive, less micro and macro aggressing types of conversations. And then also how we can improve overall resources and supports in this area. Now, you all are probably well aware, you've seen the emails, there's a student group that has coalesced, the collective. And, you know, I received an email from that group, I think it was like September 15th or 16th, you know, sharing the concerns that they have and sharing their requests or demands of things that they would like to see changed. And, you know, I personally view the collective and their efforts as wind at our sails, right? And really helping to move things forward even more quickly. And I've always said that student voice is the most powerful voice. And I'm always wanting and encouraging and supporting student voice. We invited them to our Dean's Cabinet meeting. We had five representatives from the collective that came to our Dean's Cabinet meeting. And the Dean's Cabinet is myself, Associate Assistant Deans, and department chairs. And, you know, we had a chance to speak with them and really get a better idea around their concerns, had some follow-up communications. And I know that by October the 31st, we're going to provide them a specific plan for greater student engagement in the school's shared governance process, what we're planning to implement in terms of supplemental questions for the end of semester instructor evaluations that address equity in the course curriculum and classroom culture. We're introducing a process for bias incident reporting and also associated accountability and infrastructures. So we are definitely working to not only be responsive to those specific requests coming from the students, but also the, you know, increasing and ramping up those efforts of what we have been working on. A second area is a priority area is our budget. COVID-19 has thrown a wrench in the university's budget, and thus it throws a wrench in the school's budget. And so, you know, I've been looking at some reports with my finance director since fiscal year 17, right? So we operate on a fiscal year, which is July 1 to June 30th of the following year. And the year that it's ending is that fiscal year. So we're in fiscal year or FY 21. I began in FY 17. I began June 2016, and that FY 17 ended June 30th, 17. So since FY 17, we have had a 34% increase in our instructional growth in terms of our FTEs, our teaching, but our faculty hiring has stayed flat. So part of my challenge is amidst all the budget issues at the university level, How do I advocate with the university so we can have a change in our base budget allocation to be able to support us hiring more faculty? And that hiring more faculty is critically important for me because a priority and what's been included in all of our searches as a required characteristic is not a commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, or culturally responsive practice, is demonstrated experience in those areas. So we need to make sure that with our new hires, that we're hiring underrepresented minority faculty and we're hiring people who have a strong lived experience understanding of all of these issues. And so that's why from a budget standpoint, that hiring is really important. And then with our new undergraduate degree programs, how do we further build out our student support units, our graduate studies and student services so that our supports were able to move? I mean, I think we do a good job in tactically providing the support for people to traject through their degree programs, but we want to make sure that we are contributing greatly to the experience that the student is having, that to ensure that our students are having a very positive experience as they're trajecting through the program, not that they're tactically supported as they're going through the program. And the third priority, and then I will be quiet, or not be quiet, I will answer questions. A third priority is our development and fundraising efforts. I've been working with our Senior Director for Development, Ed Cardos, who's on the call. The university's Development and Alumni Relations Office, each dean has been asked to set 2 years, we set 3 years, but 2 to 3 year fundraising priorities for our unit. And our number one fundraising priority in the school is for scholarships, because we understand that we have a more diverse student body here at VCU than other institutions. We understand that folks going into education are not necessarily entering into fields that they're going to make the kind of money as if they're going into medicine or some other areas where they're more easily able to pay off student loans. So we've got to make it a priority for us to increase the amount of scholarships that we have to help reduce the cost that students are paying out of pocket, or reduce the cost that students are paying in terms of loans. And going back to the second area, which is budget, so that we can also have the resources to expand supports for our research operation, so faculty can get more research grants, to have more doctoral research assistantships available, and so that we can expand the amount of grad assistantships that we have. So that third area is looking at the development and fundraising support. So I will stop there. And I see a question, funding for master students. Let me address that a little bit more specifically. Historically in our school, we've only provided funding to PhD students. And we've only provided one type of funding, which was kind of this Cadillac 12-month, 9 credits fall, 9 credits spring, 6 credits summer stipend for the entire year. And the stipends were like $25,000. In terms of what's offered at universities, that's unusually high, and we're only providing supports for PhD students. We've made some changes. It's not been fun for folks going through the change, but we've decreased those stipends to $18,000, which is more in line with other universities. And instead of having one option, we have many different options. So we have 12-month and 9-month assistantships. We have those stipends with the 12-month and 9 months. And we're also creating assistantships that are just stipends without tuition. And then we're also creating assistantships for master students. And so we're really creating more funding opportunities because historically we've not had those for master's students. And one of the other things that I've done in startup packages for our new faculty, what we used to do was say, well, as part of a startup, you get a doc grad assistant for your first 2 or 3 years. What I've done is put funding in as part of the startup package for hourly grad assistant support, so that our new faculty have opportunities to hire master students and get them engaged in helping to provide research support, which also helps that pipeline of master students who want to go into doc programs.
I have another question in the chat. Mitchell Perry says, health insurance for doc students, question mark. Also, what work is being done to reform the tenure process?
Man, two really, really good questions. There are conversations at the university level, and in all honesty, I don't know where they are, but there's conversation at the university level that we need to provide health insurance for our doctoral students, right? And I don't know where those conversations are. I know that COVID, anything to do with resources, COVID has hit a wrench. But we believe that next year, fall will kind of be out from under that, because COVID's financial impact on the school has not been, on the university, was not as bad as originally projecting. We were projecting like a 18% drop in revenue, and it didn't happen. So I do need to follow up, and I'm going to ask, who can I ask? I'm going to ask Jewel. Jewel, if you can remind me to follow up regarding where we are with those conversations regarding health insurance for grad students, and then we'll send that information out to you all. We'll send an update. Regarding the other question about reforming the tenure process, and Mitchell, that question is an example of the difference between diversity, equity, and inclusion work and when we actually begin to do anti-racism work, which is dismantling systemic racism. That has been an area that I've been myopically focused on since I've gotten here. And it's not just the tenure process, it's the annual evaluation process, right? That we've got to address the annual evaluation process before or as part of the process in addressing tenure. And I've been asking for this since my first year. And there's been a lot of reasons, why, and it got to the level that last fall, I said, we're going to do this. And I want this done by this date. Now, because that date was going to be by the end of spring. I wanted by the end of spring that we had a revised annual evaluation, because we had a scholarship rubric, which we really need a research and scholarship. And that rubric was very vague. And we had no teaching and service rubric. And I see all the evaluations for all the faculty. And there was clear implicit bias in how our faculty of color were being evaluated. And then I saw that play out in promotion and tenure. And I've also looked back at previous scenarios where underrepresented minority faculty were put on term contracts and compared their level of productivity to people even who got tenured. So we have a problem. So I did extend that deadline from the end of spring to the end of this fall. So, and we have a faculty committee that's working on that. And then after that, we're also going to be looking at revising our policies and procedures within the university, within the school, including how we're looking at that tenure process. I personally believe that it's a process that can't be totally objective, but we definitely have more room for it to be more objective, because the more subjective it is, the more open it is for implicit bias to play a role in that process.
Thank you, Dean Daire, for answering that. We also have Margaret with a follow-up question, and then we'll jump to Shanita, who raised her hand. Margaret said, I'm a master's. Oh, wait. She said, so the assistantships for a master's will only be hourly without tuition assistance?
So that's the follow-up that I need to get from grad studies, because there's some conversations on, you know, should we have something in place for all of our students to have health insurance? Or is this an issue where students on grad assistantships would have health insurance? Or is this a question related to doc students would have health insurance? I've heard all three of those discussions, and I've heard those conversations at my dean's level meetings, but I'll need to get clarification from what is the university looking at doing. But paying attention to what's happening nationally, particularly with Obamacare, does really play a role in all of that also, because for students, if you're under 26 or 27, you know, and in school, you're still able, I believe, under Obamacare to be on your parents' health insurance, and that's something that might change. So what's going on politically does have immediate implications on health insurance for students.
Thank you. And also, Shanita, feel free to ask your question now.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Dean Daire.
Hey there.
So I have, I guess, a statement and then a question. Can you talk a little bit more about, you said the curriculum is up to the faculty. Can you talk a little bit more, just for clarity, and then I'll ask or share my statement.
Yeah, so universities espouse to what's called shared governance. And, you know, if you like to dive into that stuff, you could Google, I think it's AAUUP shared governance, and you can just dive into that process. And issues like shared governance and academic freedom, right? Which academic freedom is that administration can't, well, let me phrase it a different way. Academic freedom is that faculty members have that freedom to pursue lines of research inquiry and freedom in terms of some aspects of how they, what they choose to integrate within their classroom curriculum. And the reason why that's in place is so that administration can't, you know, that one faculty can ask and engage in more challenging research, discourse, those types of things without being silenced by administration, right? Now, I'm also going to just give Andrew Daire my own personal caveat. Academia, the institution of higher academia as a broad institution, and just looking at people on this Zoom call, was not created for most of the people on this call. And for the few white men who are on this call, if you're not independently wealthy, then it was not created for you either, right? The origins of higher academia were for elite white men. That's the foundation of higher academia. And from that foundation, everything else has been built. So I agree wholeheartedly with shared governance, wholeheartedly. And I agree wholeheartedly with academic freedom. However, 2 points. We should not use academic freedom and shared governance as a shield to perpetrate racial injustice within our classrooms, right? And the second thing, we have to recognize that with that academic freedom and with that shared governance, we also have a responsibility that we have to pay attention to. So within the structure of higher academia, as dean, there's certain decisions that as dean, I can make on my own, so to speak. Now, I have a dean's cabinet that we make collective decisions as a dean's cabinet. I can sometimes trump that cabinet, right? Like for instance, there were some financial decisions in increasing the budget for our DEI committee. And there were some folks that were concerned about that amidst all the budget cuts that were happening in the spring. And I said, I don't care what kind of budget financial crisis that happens, I am not touching a penny for anything that has to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And if anything, if I have an opportunity to increase the support, I'm going to increase it. And that's actually what I did, increase the support for home scholars so we could actually bring in 2 more home scholars this year. Most decisions are shared governance decisions where, like hiring, right? The faculty, we create the search committees, the faculty and staff and students are on those search committees, then search, and then, they narrow down the candidates for the screening interviews. They conduct the screening interviews, identify the folks to come on campus for the on-campus interview. I meet with them and they provide me a review of strengths and weaknesses. I told them I don't want it ranked. And then I work with the chair to make that hiring decision. That's a great example of shared governance. Curriculum, I can make a request, but the faculty and the faculty committees, the curriculum, the program committees for each program area, the curriculum committees for the department, and the school level curriculum committees, it then goes to the university committees. Those are faculty committees that any administrators that might sit on those committees have an ad hoc function and don't vote. And so the curriculum is really governed by the faculty. Admission standards are governed by the faculty.
Thank you for that. And I just wanted to share, I participated in the call that we had over the summer that you led. And I appreciated what you shared then. And also just hearing the stand that you take around work with respect to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and just kind of calling things as they are. And so I appreciate the messages that you have sent. As a student, I want to just say there's a disconnect that's occurring between your messages and what gets translated down to different programs and into the classroom. And so I have a concern about that because it becomes this weird space where to listen to you, you are inviting student voice. And we want student participation. We, especially in a program like educational leadership, we're developing leaders. And the social worker in me is also an advocate. And so when I hear the messages that you share, that I firmly am like, yes, the translation is getting lost when it's time to get to the program and in the classroom. And I think it puts students in a awkward, weird, bad position because there is this relationship dynamic where a student has to decide, how much am I going to push what I know to be right and true without fear that someone professor or even a classmate is going to say something, just just say, I want to say because they're going to feel some kind of way about it. That's kind of, the lay term. And so I don't know where the work needs to be. I just wanted to bring that to your attention. It sounds like the collective group has. There are some ed leadership students who are also attempting to, have the conversations as well, because that's important. But it's a fine line. And I don't know how you can support this idea of student voice without fear of repercussions or anything along those lines. And so I just wanted to share that. Again, I do appreciate what you shared to students. I think the message comes out loud and clear. There is a disconnect occurring, and I don't know how to support other students and fixing it.
I mean, I agree with everything you just said, and I agree with what Portia said, that really, instead of a relationship, it's a power dynamic. That's what we're leaning into. That's what I'm leaning into with my leadership team. That's what I'm leading into with my leadership team. And it's something that I was very intentional in saying, we're going to have a 2-year journey on this. But then after that 2-year journey, I've got some set expectations, some minimum expectations of, if you're going to be on my leadership team, I need to see these minimum expectations, right? That's part of what we're doing, with the work that we're doing around, I want to say anti-racist work, but I don't know if we're there to say it's anti-racist work in the school. I think for some of us, we're doing it from an anti-racist lens, right? Tamika Ferguson is on this call, and she's our interim assistant dean for student affairs and inclusive excellence. And I feel confident that we're doing these things from an anti-racist lens, but I fully recognize the difference between anti-racism and DEI. A big challenge that we have to move towards is this view that I am non-racist, so I'm not part of the problem. Or even what I think I see here in the school is I'm actively non-racist, right? So I'm just non-racist, but I am actively non-racist. But if you're non-racist or even actively non-racist in a racist environment or a racist system or a racist culture, then at the minimum, you're perpetuating, encouraging, upholding, or supporting that racist system, even if it is unintentionally happening. I personally don't believe, and there's a time when I wouldn't say this, but I personally don't believe that we have one faculty member. Now, I can be wrong, and I could very well be wrong, but I'm just sharing my belief that I don't believe we have one faculty member that I believe is intentionally racist, right? But I do believe, like every other organization in America, we have people who are blinded by their implicit bias. The analogy I give, it's like Superman, right? Superman unbuttons his shirt and it shows the S, and in some cartoons, there's like a bright light that shines. I think there are some people who think they're such social justice warriors that they unbutton and the bright light of the S shining blocks them from realizing they're stepping on somebody's neck. So the third point, I'm getting worked up. Just need to take a breath and calm down. The third point is diversity, equity, and inclusion work can be nice and cute work. But the work we need to start doing is interrogating whiteness and white supremacy. Defining white supremacy, and this is not an accusation saying someone is a white supremacist, but it's the idea or ideology that white people and the views, beliefs, actions, behaviors, intentions of white people are superior to people of color and their belief, intentions, etc. And we all inhale that smog because we've all been intentionally misled in our educational journey to intentionally not been taught about the contributions of African Americans and Blacks in this country. The only Blacks that are presented in our history books are exceptions, which reinforces the message that the one or two were exceptions. So if the one or two were presented as exceptions, what's the general message that's being told? We're more segregated now than we were 40 years ago. So for anyone to believe that implicit bias is not a real thing, regardless of what color you are. There are plenty of Black people here that know about Black on Black crime, and I'm not talking about drive-by shootings. I'm talking about old dude in Kentucky, the DA in Kentucky. Is it Kentucky?
You talking about Cameron?
Yes, yes. So interrogating whiteness and white superiority is something that white people need to do, but we all need to do it. That I think is going to be an important transition for us in the school. When we can transition to where collectively, as a school and our faculty can, in a non-fragile way, really lean into that interrogation of white supremacy and white superiority, I think that is the hump we need to go over. Because once folks go through that process and then they begin to learn the history, they begin to be more empathetic and understanding to the lived experiences of people of color, then we can respond with empathy. So when that student raises a question, our immediate response is empathy and understanding. And that's when we get to encourage discourse and conversation. And not only does that help the growth and learning of the student that asked the question, it helps the growth and learning of the other students in the class, and it helps the growth and learning of the faculty member. That's that culture that I'm aspiring for us here in the school. But we have to do it quickly, right? And here's another question, and I'm sorry for taking so long in answering these. And this is a question that's come up from some, is how do we take a developmental and a supportive approach for folks going through this process? I am all about development and supportive approach, but you can't harm and traumatize people. There has to be a line. You can't harm and traumatize people. So I will stop there.
Thank you, Dean Daire. We have 3 more questions. One is a follow-up question with Margaret. Another is with Lisa, and it's about mental health. And Mitchell has one about his follow-up question about progress of tenure and yearly evaluation. And Portia also has a follow-up question. And after Portia, we will probably have to wrap up.
Okay, I promise to be brief.
Okay.
And we can always do a follow-up. So don't feel like this is it. You're not going to have this opportunity till next year. We can do a follow-up. So.
Hello, Dean Daire. I'm Margaret Sequeira, and I'm a master's student at the School of Ed. And my question is that you had made this point about changing the doctoral stipend and then making more money and assistantships and so forth available for master's students. And my question was that, like, the doctoral students assistantship had tuition assistance plus the hourly rate, which means that you can go to school and your job is the assistantship and you're getting both. So as a master's student, it sounded like those assistantships would only cover the hourly rate, which I looked at some of those, and it's not like I'm making tons of money as an adjunct instructor over in the philosophy department, because I'm not, just in case you think the humanities are doing better over there. So my question is will any of that tuition assistance plus the hourly wage assistantships be available to those of us in the master's programs, or are you only looking at those as hourly wage positions, but would be in the School of Ed, so maybe closer to your ultimate career and education goals? So I think you addressed it as health insurance, but I was really interested in the tuition versus hourly rate, or hourly rate and tuition assistant combo.
So that's where we would really look to the research side and our faculty to get funded grants to be able to provide that support for the master's students. When we look at our E&G dollars, which are our state dollars, we get some funding from grad students, and then from grad studies, and then we supplement that. So those types of grad assistantships would be for doctoral students, and that's from the state monies and from the monies we get from graduate studies. They're funneled in that way. We're able to do paid stipends and those types of opportunities. But in terms of assistantships for master's students that would cover tuition, that would really come from grant work. And I know for me, when I was at University of Central Florida, started a research institute, I supported probably about 40 students or about 50 master's students over the course of 10 years with research funded projects. So it's something that we need our faculty to engage in, that type of research, write the grants, and not just think about doc students as grad assistants, but think about master students as grad assistants.
Thank you, Dean Daire. Next is Lisa Cooper. You can ask your question now.
Good salutations, beautiful people. So 2 questions, I'll try to be fast. And it's for Dean Daire. You talked a lot about the mental health of students, and I am a student in the EDD program. So I appreciate that. But I'm also a staff member with VCU. And I just wonder what support has been giving to your staff. I know you talked about mental health, but like I am constantly seeing the staff pouring into us and being mindful of us. And I appreciate it. I know that I am a doc student and there is a certain rigor that I need to, uphold to, but I know it's coming to the detriment of the staff. And I see that, and they're not saying that. So I just wonder what supports are in place for them, because I know that they're pouring from an empty cup. And then the next question that I have is for you, being a Black male in leadership, what support do you have? Like, I don't see a lot of other colleagues around the table on this call. I don't see other deans. So I'm just wondering, what support do you have to continue carrying out the work that you're doing as you try to move the needle and move to a more, racial, social just education program?
Yeah. I appreciate both of those questions, and I agree that our staff pour into students. When I meet with our department chairs and unit leaders, this is something that I talk about, is that, one, we've got to make sure we're staying on the pulse of our staff, right? And faculty, and I'm going to use the term staff to say, well, team, right? Faculty and staff, because we're not seeing people. We're not walking by their doors and saying hi and then seeing a sad face and engaging in conversation. The only time we're seeing people is on Zoom. And most people on Zoom, if you're not feeling that good, you're gonna, mute your video, and, so we've got to be intentional about checking into people. The other thing that I've asked for is don't ask too many questions and offer as much flexibility. Somebody needs 2 days off, take it. And that I think is important, because, and then to encourage people. I'm continuously encouraging my direct reports, you need to take time off. I had a couple department chairs, I said it jokingly, but I was serious. I said, I am directing you to take time off. That you need to tell me by the end of the week, 5 days that you're going to take off in the next 2 weeks, you know, and so we need to do those types of things to give people that space. And then in terms of deadlines, we just need to be incredibly accommodating. So it really goes back to the same thing that I'm asking for our students is we just have to be empathetic and understanding. In terms of support for me, man, I won't go too deep in that because I have cried on Zoom calls before. I can tell you that, you know, having folks like Tamika, you know, having our new Associate Dean for Academic Affairs, Luciana de Oliveira, you know, Kathy Rudisil, our Associate Dean for Research and Faculty Development, we're all on the same page and we lean on each other and I can lean on them. Ashir Nassim, who's the VP for Inclusive Excellence, we joke about it. We check in on each other. We joke that sometimes we're the only ones that are checking in on each other, you know, to see how we're doing. And finally, I realize the immense privilege and blessings that I have. And not that I'm any type of a martyr in any way, but I am going to, this is my mission. My mission, my charge is how we can create a transformational unit where everyone can pursue their level of excellence free from any type of bias and freely able to be their authentic selves. And my second goal, which is when I die, I want to accomplish this goal so this can be part of my eulogy. This guy has really created pathways for underrepresented minorities to have tenured positions in flagship state universities and research universities. And that's why there's such a focus on that pipeline, because that's how we transform the system. Because we have to ask ourselves, education degrees were the only degrees that people of color could get pre-desegregation. Why are colleges and schools of education the least diverse on many campuses? That's a deep question. It's structural and we have to dismantle that.
All right, so thank you, Dean Daire, for that.
And I've
Next week,
got a couple minutes if we want to go a couple minutes over.
okay, yeah, it's already 1 o'clock, so we'll just take Mitch's question about tenureship, and then we'll do Portia's question. So Mitch said that will there be a regular update on the progress of tenure and yearly evaluation reform? A lot of the frustration comes, as you say, from going long periods of time without clear answers or updates.
Yeah, you know, I think that's something we can do. It's a painfully slow process. It's a painfully slow process and not one that I think people are running to. I do know by the end of the fall, I've been very clear, I want these revised guidelines in place. But here's the thing, it probably is not even going to get implemented till the fiscal year or to the calendar year of 2022, right? And in terms of the promotion and tenure process, you know, we'll start that process and revising policies and procedures after we finish this process. We can definitely provide those, you know, those updates. We generally are providing those updates and having those conversations in faculty meetings, but definitely can make sure that we're updating that more general. I know we're gonna be revising. I've made a request for the revision of the DEI website, the DEI committee website, so we can have a dashboard so we can talk about all of the things that we're doing and also have a progress dashboard that lines into the inclusive excellence strategic plan goal that we have for the school.
All right, Portia, you're next.
Okay, thank you, Amber. Hey, Dean Dare, how are you?
I'm doing well, Portia.
I have a kind of a more forward-thinking question. So you've talked a lot about like increasing the diversity of faculty and staff. You've talked about advancing or evolving curriculum in a number of ways, which I think are all super, super important. I will also say, I think what comes with that is new ways of thinking, and not just from your faculty, but from students. And so as you all are admitting folks this year, next year, right, in the climate, political climate, let me say that out loud, that we're in, I think there are going to be students who are coming to the School of Ed with new approaches and ideas to some of their research. I'm just interested in like what things are being put in place to support students who might have non-traditional paths to this work, who might be thinking about outside of the box methodologies, who might be trying to get creative with some of their approaches and theories, which may not be as traditional to the School of Ed. So I'd just be interested in like kind of what supports or maybe even ideas you have to make sure those students are also matriculating to graduation smoothly, even if some of their ideas are new to your faculty and staff, or if faculty and staff are still on their journey, right? And broad horizon around.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. And if we think about it, that's the purpose of higher education. You know, I think we see that what you just talked about, we see it a little bit more realized in the hard sciences, right? You've got that brilliant doc student or master's student that's working in your research lab. You set them free. You might have some reins on them as they're learning, but you set them free because that's that innovation that one should expect at a Research One institution. So your fundamental question should be even a fundamental difference between attending a research institution than attending a teaching institution. When you attend a research institution, you should expect that there's going to be more of a palette, more of a flavor for innovation and those innovative ideas. You know, the only reins that should be in place might have to do with accreditation. You know, if you're going to graduate with this degree, you need to take this path, you know, but there could even be things where you've got rooms for electives and faculty members can do course substitutions at their discretion. And so that's the culture that I think we need to have. And part of that culture are students being able to have that space. We've got to transition from this power hierarchy to looking at our students as colleagues, where we have this nugget that we are experts about, but then they pour into our nuggets. We take our nugget and pour into them. And that's how we both become better along this journey. So, you know, we have to do that. And I think the concern that I have is and this is something that the collective has brought up. You know, these 2-year initiatives are beautiful, but I'm a student right now. and that's what I'm wrestling with. And that's why I'm trying to get this sense of urgency, right? This sense of urgency for folks that, okay, I get it. This can be a 2-year journey for you to work towards being more culturally responsive, to maybe being, you know, decolonizing your syllabi. Okay, yeah, I get that that's a 2-year journey. But please, dear God, it can't be a 2-year journey to respond to people with empathy and understanding. Jesus, you should be able to do that now. And it would go a long way. Forget any technical expertise in culturally responsive practice, pedagogy, and critical race theory, and forget all of that. What if your questions were just received with empathy? Wow, Portia, that's a great question. I have never thought about that. Can you help me to understand it a little bit more? You know, let's try to meet afterwards, because you are proposing a non-traditional path, and I want to see how I can understand that and how we can maybe make that happen for you. Gee, that's not that, it should not be that complicated. And if it is, Jesus, whoever you worship, help us. It should not be that complicated. And that's what I'm saying. My God, empathy can be done now. Sorry for getting a little worked up.
Thank you, Dean Daire.
All right, that was the last question we have time for today. Thank you everyone for attending. Dean Daire, any last words?
You know, your voice, and some of you all, particularly the home scholars, you've heard me say this. Students' voice is the most powerful voice. Students' voice is the most powerful voice, because I can tell you that the things that are being advocated for are things that I'm excited to see, things that we need to be moving forward. And students are our primary consumers. I mean, can you imagine if Panera's like, I don't care what our customers want? I mean, how ridiculous and absurd would that be? So to me, student voice is central. That student experience is central. It's not just, you know, as an underrepresented minority student, too often, all my degrees, it was like, I'm stomaching this to get this piece of paper. It shouldn't be like that. It should be this wonderful, thriving learning experience. It should not be surviving the BS. I see the recording line, so it's censoring me, so that's a good thing. But it shouldn't be surviving, it should be thriving. So I'm here for you all. If we need to do another one of these, we'll do it. And I know we're having a follow-up to the Coming Together Against Racial Injustice Town Hall. I can't remember the date, the 30th. It's sometime the end of the month, and we'll lean into a little bit more regarding this. And my hope is that our faculty and staff are going to be on there and also be more responsive to questions. So thank you all so much. I appreciate you all.
Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to meet with us. And Meredith will send a follow-up email to everyone with the recording, and also a Google form where you can ask more questions. All right, well, everyone, please have a great day, and we'll see y'all next time. Bye.
Thanks.